Welcome to another episode of DesignSpark Ask the Expert. Today I'm joined by Teledean Flir for the third time and Jason Cargill. Today we're going to be talking about acoustic imaging sensing, thermal imaging sensing, and tools and software that helps users get the job done and get the benefit out of their products. Hi Jason, thanks for coming back for a third time.
Hi Greg, good to be back.
Great, fantastic. So in the world of sensing, if we think back, it's always like, okay, if it doesn't sound right and it doesn't feel right, then it's not right. So things, does it vibrate? Is it too hot, for example? And that's still the true kind of paradigm, isn't it? If things don't sound right and they don't feel right, then they're not right. But with technology these days, obviously you can get a lot more depth out of it. And that's what we're going to talk about today with acoustic imaging and thermal imaging. So thanks for joining us. And I want to start this time round with acoustic imaging, if I might. So the Si2 is a new acoustic imager that you guys have launched, and already it's been called sort of the best imager on the market. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we launched the Si2 recently, and it's the next iteration, if you like, of the Flir acoustic imaging range, and it's been added since the introduction of the Si124, which has been a successful platform for us. But like anything else within technology, you're always looking at ways to improve the actual capabilities of the device and how the user can interact with the device to maximize the efficiencies and the effectiveness of using a piece of equipment like that as a solution. So the Si2 has made a few strides forward in regards to its capability. Even something as simple as the distance that it can be used over, for example. I mean, using an acoustic imaging camera, the big benefit is it gives you a very wide field of view to be able to look into for example, your industrial area, your manufacturing facility, and you can spot potential leaks from a distance of up to 200 meters now, which is kind of 100 meters more than the previous version. So it allows users to really pick up those leaks from a distance and then use the equipment then to get closer, to get a better result, a more accurate result. But ultimately, that's just only one of the factors that we've improved with the Si2. We've now added things like LED torch facility, which is built in, which means the camera can now be used in dark environments, which can become very useful for some of our industrial users. We've also increased the capability of the filters to become automatic in regards to their environment. So what the filters do, the whole point of an acoustic camera is you have an array of microphones built into the front of the device. In our case, there's 124 microphones. And those microphones are installed in a certain way that allows them to triangulate sound accurately. So you can get the position of your sound source, but that's in competition with the environmental sound. So if you're working in a heavy industry facility, for example, where there's a lot of background noise, the ability to filter out that background noise becomes very important. So the camera can now automatically assign filters based on what the camera hears. So although there's still the capability to manually change the filters, it's been taken into the hands of the device being able to actually assign a filter itself. Also with the addition of an automatic distance meter as well, because distance is very important when it comes to acoustic imaging. So we've improved the filtering, we've improved the distance capability. We now have a wider range of frequencies to work within as well. So we can now work with sound frequencies from 2 kilohertz up to 132 kilohertz, which from our perspective expands the potential use of the device for many more potential sound sources. And we've also increased the minimum leak capacity as well. So we can now detect down to 0.0032 litres per minute from a distance of 2.5 meters and 0.0044 litres per minute at a distance of 6 meters. So we've really enhanced the capability of the device to find and locate those smaller leaks and also quantify the cost. Because in another addition to the Si2, we can now quantify different types of gases. So whereas the Si124 was optimized for compressed air, the Si2 can still be used to quantify compressed air leaks, but we now have the addition of a number of gases as well. So for example, we have hydrogen and ammonia, methane, natural gas, helium, argon, to name a few. So that means if the customer now knows what medium are in the pipeware, for example, they can now quantify the costs of those additional gases as well, which can be a really useful feature when it comes to energy costs and reducing unnecessary lost costs through leakage.
Yeah.
And we've also enhanced the view. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say that sounds quite an impressive feature set. So I'll come back to the gas if I might in a moment. But in terms of the triangulation of actually pinpointing where the issue is, that's really centric to the user experience as well, isn't it? I mean, you were talking about industry there, you were talking about torch and lighting up various areas. So we know that sometimes it can actually be hard to find any issue on a system, particularly when you get into real sensitivity. But what you were saying there about triangulation, you can actually pinpoint exactly where that issue is. So that's a really great benefit for the user to do fast, accurate on-site measurement, for example. But
Yes.
what you just said there about gas, I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah.
So you're saying about you can actually quantify. When you say quantify, are we talking about the volume? Are we talking about the cost, or are we talking about both?
Well, it's both. In actuality, we're looking at a litres per minute, for example, or it could be a cubic feet per minute. There's a number of different options within the device. But let's use litres per minute as an example now. It'll give you an accurate litres per minute lost value based on the type of leak and the pressure of the leak and the shape of the leak. But it also combines that with the additional data that you also require, which is the cost. So based on those figures, it can extrapolate out over a year, and it can tell you over a year how much a particular leak would cost. Now, the idea is it doesn't identify different types of gas. You need to know what the medium is before you carry out the inspection. But if you know, for example, this pipework contains methane, and you know what the cost of this methane is to you as a user, you can put that information into the device as a parameter, and it will now calculate over a year what that potential leak would cost. So it just expands out the use cases for the particular acoustic camera that we have introduced into the market, the Si2.
Okay, and that's more or less instantaneous, right? If you obviously know the medium, the gas, and you know the unit cost of that gas, you can extrapolate on the spot potentially, right?
On screen, yeah, and it's
on screen.
And obviously then you've got the additional function of having we've got two options with the Flir acoustic imaging cameras. We can utilize a piece of software that some existing users of thermal cameras use, which is called Thermal Studio Pro. And Thermal Studio allows you to install a plugin which is compatible with the acoustic range of cameras, and which means you could, if you wanted to, you could combine thermal and acoustic, for example, as a report generator or an analysis piece of software. But also, if you only use the Si2, for example, you have access to a free, secure cloud-based service, which is called Acoustic Viewer, which allows you to securely store images which are captured with the relevant data included. You can then use that for analysis purposes and also to generate simple reports. And it's all cloud-based, and as I say, it's included as a free option when you purchase your camera, and then you can pair it to your account. So at all times, you've got a regular inflow of data to your cloud service account. And obviously that's important when it comes to the data, about managing what you're looking after and being able to measure it. It's all tied in.
Yeah, that sounds actually, a really good, obviously, combination there for clarification, identification, but then obviously measuring through data points, etc. Then you can take corrective action. You can scale the cost of the issue that you're having on site, for example, and prioritizing workflows as well, I would imagine, on the back of that data.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the sort of the real time analysis, and it's enhanced by the fact that we've now introduced we've now introduced a 12 megapixel camera installed into the Si2. So we've now got a far clearer color image as opposed to the predecessor, which was a black and white image. So we have a much clearer image now to actually superimpose those markers on. So, with the very wide field of view which we have, which on a horizontal is 75 degrees, it allows you to really look at a wide area. You can look at multiple points. So you can not only highlight your worst leak in the field of view, which will always be assigned a crosshair over it, but it will also show you where there's other potential leaks. Because one thing about repairing leaks, it's those worst leaks you need to address first, the ones which are costing you the most money. And the advantage of an acoustic imaging camera, it is instantaneous. As soon as you point the acoustic camera in the direction of a potential leak, it will highlight it immediately. And that's when you can really start to sort of respond very efficiently to when it comes to repairing those leaks.
Yeah. So for the Si2, you've got three versions, right? You've got the LD, the PB, and the Pro. Can you just quickly take us through the differences between those versions?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it's the LD version. LD stands for leak detection. So the LD version has the capacity to work with what we class as gas leaks, and gas could include compressed air. It's a terminology which we use. So those other materials I mentioned before, the mediums of argon and helium and ammonia and the other gases which are now included within its capability. But there's also another feature within the Si2, which is available on the LD camera and also the Pro version. It's called mech mode, mechanical mode. So what mechanical mode is, it's available, as I say, with the LD version. So the LD version will do leak detection and mechanical mode. And mechanical mode now uses a phenomenon called crest factor, which is a common terminology used with the deterioration of bearings, for example. Mm-hmm. So what we look at the crest factor performance of a particular bearing, and we also look at something called kurtosis. And kurtosis is the name given to a phenomenon which is related to the amplitude of the signals which is being received by the camera. So you end up with two numbers on the screen. One is crest factor and one is kurtosis. And those figures can then give you a good idea in regard to the potential condition of a particular bearing in a conveyor system, for example. We look at if we're looking at a crest factor of over 5 and a kurtosis figure over 0, because 0 is a normal performing kurtosis figure from our when we're calculating problems and identifying problems. So you have a heat marker, you'll have a crest factor figure, and you'll have a kurtosis figure on screen. And what it does, it's indicative of a failing bearing as a crest factor figure goes up. You'll also have an increase in the decibel level, so the sound pressure level will also increase, and the kurtosis figure will increase. And this then allows you to if you wanted to, you could utilize thermal imaging to confirm the condition of the bearing, because it will be generating more energy, more infrared energy being emitted from it. But it's another function within the acoustic cameras that we now have on board, which again enhances the potential of the user to use the product. So that's the LD version, so leak detection and mechanical mode. We then have a PD version, and PD stands for partial discharge. So when an insulator electrical component starts to break down, it starts to essentially leak electricity, and it's the partial discharge which is then created. Now, the clever function within the Si2 PD version is the fact it has an auto severity assessment, which is based on 3 parameters the user enters into the device. So line voltage, the type of component we're looking at, and the distance.
Yeah.
The camera then uses AI capability to generate a severity index based on that information. So you don't need to be a partial discharge expert to be able to utilize the camera and use the camera to capture that information, because again, it now also includes that live partial discharge information on screen in real time. So it will identify what type of partial discharge you may have picked up. It will give you a description of that partial discharge, and then it will also give you a recommendation as to a way that you can address and deal with that partial discharge. So it's a very, very clever piece of equipment, which essentially does all the thinking for you based on some limited input that is required by the user. So that's the PD version for partial discharge only. And then we have the Si2 Pro, which combines partial discharge, leak detection, and mechanical mode. So they're kind of the 3 options which we have. If you have no interest in partial discharge, then you can look at the LD version alone, which will also give you mechanical capability. If you have no interest in leak detection and you're interested in partial discharge, you can select the PD version. If you believe you can benefit from both or all 3 capabilities within the device, then you can look at the Si2 Pro as an option as well.
Fantastic. I really like what you said there about the AI inbuilt, and to me that sounds like you can spot the issue, it can describe the issue, but then it gives you the steps or advice needing to actually, well, what do we do next? So partial discharge, what I'm thinking is a lot of installations that they're not easy to, first of all, to actually enter. There could be obstructions in the way. So I'm really interested about when you were talking about the range capability of the Si2. How does that actually benefit, maybe say in an installation where we're going into where it's either restricted access or it's hard to get to, and when we're talking about energy, electrical energy, for example?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the distance becomes really important exactly because of the figure that the safety element in regards to being to gain access to a particular compound. So we have the ability to pick up these potential anomalies from a distance of up to 200 meters now. Now, what we would normally do as well, you can combine that with this 12 megapixel color high quality image. And we also now have the ability to zoom up to 8 times within the device. So we have a 1 times, 2 times, and an 8 times zoom capability. And the enhanced resolution of the camera allows you again to bring that potential object closer to you, even though physically you're not moving any closer. In an ideal situation, because the way that sound waves perform over distance and dependent on frequency, it's always better to try to get as close as you can, as safely as you can, to the source. So we may pick something up from 200 meters away, but to get the true data, the true sort of results, we need to get as close as we can still, if it's possible and if it's safe to do so. Because sound, as I say, lower frequencies travel further than higher frequencies, and even things like humid air can affect the performance of sound waves and can affect the way that they travel. So again, having this device which is designed to triangulate that sound source, it's still enhanced by the user being able to move and watch the decibel levels, because as the decibel levels increase, you're getting a better result from the device as well. So that's kind of where the combination of the additional distance, the lower detection when it comes to minimum leak detection, the quality of the screen and the ability to zoom. There's a number of factors there which can aid the user when they can't get very close to a particular, especially externally, when you look at substations and that kind of environment.
Exactly. So we obviously know that the more that you want to find out about a particular problem, you're going to have to at some point get closer to it. But that early identification, if we're thinking about things like distance and range, is really key to that first step in the process. I was going to ask you about, effective condition monitoring is all about getting the information that you need. But I think a lot of what you have covered already really does cover what you were saying, both in terms of the descriptive functionality of the product, but also what you were talking about with the data, the information that you get back about what is the next step in actually containing this, or going to rectify it. But in terms of acoustic imaging and condition monitoring, would you say that they really do go hand in hand in industry?
Oh, definitely. There's a curve associated with the decline of an asset from its first installation. And depending on where you are on that curve, depends really where you get the best results from a piece of equipment to try and predict potential faults. And thermography is something that we are heavily involved in, and we have been for decades. And that's what we are really known for, is thermal imaging when it comes to predictive maintenance, preventative maintenance. But also on that curve as well, ultrasonics tend to start showing problems much earlier in that curve than thermography will. Thermography issues are excessive generation of infrared energy, which is all indicative of a potential breakdown, a potential failure. But the kind of acoustic side can pick up problems a lot earlier as well. So there's definitely, I'd say there's definitely hand in hand in regards to the ability to have both acoustic capability and thermal capability, which is why the fact that you can utilize the same software can also be useful from a user perspective, from reporting and analysis, so they can provide as much information as possible within their reporting capabilities.
Yeah. Excuse me. And I think it's important to call that out about when we're talking about condition monitoring, there are certain conditions that automatically need to be measured, if you know what I mean. This might sound a little bit simplistic, but the further you go down to the acoustic level, you're identifying things much earlier before they become a major problem, as in, I can now hear there's a problem. Well, when I hear there's a problem, it's too late. Let the technology do it for you. I just want to go back to range. I just have the thought. So you're talking about 200 meters, okay? So that's over 600 feet. For reference, okay, we're in the UK and we all know the Blackpool Tower, right?
Yep.
That's about 518 foot to the top of the flagpole.
Yeah.
So just for scale alone, that's what we're talking about. That's probably what, 3/4 of the height of the Eiffel Tower, just for reference. That is a pretty large range.
It is. and it's about identifying those problems where, we can walk into an environment with this Si2 device, which has got this really wide field of view. But even at that kind of distance, the height of the Blackpool Tower, for example, it's also dependent upon frequency of sounds and that type of thing, because as I say, lower frequency sounds travel further. But you're certainly in a position where, we've certainly, from a specification, we have measured certain sounds at that type of distance. So certainly, it's to put things into kind of a picture in people's minds. It's a really good analogy from a distance perspective. We're talking a long way to potentially find those problems, which can be costing money that you'd never know about. Because also, as I mentioned earlier on, with the background noises that you can have, being able to filter those out and just focus on what's causing the actual sound issue that we're dealing with at the time. All those combination of factors become really important to give you a real cohesive solution when it comes to acoustic detection.
Yeah. It sounds like a great feature set that you guys are now offering through the Si2 for acoustic imaging, which I'm really, I've been looking at the product recently, and the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking, wow, this is really some piece of equipment. The other area that we're talking about, obviously we're talking about acoustic, and you mentioned acoustic and thermal going hand in hand. We did speak about thermal imaging on a previous episode. Yeah. I'm interested to know more about the Flir one and the app, the smartphone app, for example. Could you just tell our listeners a little bit more about that product?
Yeah. So it's called the Flir One Edge, and we have two models in the range. We have the Flir One Edge and the Flir One Edge Pro. And essentially, it's the next iteration of what a lot of users may already be familiar with, the Flir One range, which was the small plug-in device for your Apple or Android phone. It was a product that Flir launched a few years ago, very, very popular. It really gave users the ability to take the first step into thermography with a relatively low-cost device, but still had the ability to give you accurate information. So what we've done is we've now developed a product which is compatible with either Apple or Android. You don't have a connector to plug in, so you're not restricted with any type of Lightning or USB-C connector. It can be used remotely from your phone, so it's linked to your phone, and all of the data is captured through the Flir One Edge or Edge Pro and stored on your phone, and then it's used in combination with an app called the Flir One app, which again, for those users of the traditional Flir One device, they may already have that app installed on their tablet or phone. Works in the same way, but now works with a different platform. And it really gives you the ability to capture accurate information. I mean, if we look at the Flir One Edge Pro in particular, that's a 160 by 120 detector, which essentially gives the user 19,200 measurement points on a device which is small, compact, having the added advantage it can be used remotely from your phone up to a distance of up to 30 meters, but depends on the environment. But that means you can be utilizing the camera away from the phone to a certain degree, which really enhances the user's experience. For example, it could be automotive, where you need to put the camera down into an engine bay, for example, to look at a component in an engine bay. You can now do that and hold the phone separately. So the Flir One app allows you to put spot markers on, just like you would with a traditional thermal camera. You can have a hotspot marker added on there. So as soon as the camera looks at a particular area, it will automatically assign a hotspot to the hottest pixel it sees. You can do the same with a cold spot pixel. And then you can create reports essentially with this very simple app. And it's a free app as well. So really, really powerful tool for us. The Flir One Edge model is an 80 by 60 detector. So the resolution is lower on the Edge model, but still 4,800 pixels. It's still a lot of information to capture, but tends to be more useful at your higher thermal contrasts. The Flir One Edge Pro also has a feature called Vivid IR as part of its thermal imaging capability, which essentially enhances the thermal image. So it enhances the image for the user as well with the Flir One Edge Pro. So it's a really, it's a compact device. It's IP54 when it comes to ingress protection. It's 2-meter drop tested. It will fit over a tablet as well in the horizontal position. So if you're working with an organization that utilizes tablets rather than mobile phones, you still have the capability to fit this device securely onto a tablet or a mobile phone. So really,
Yeah.
really useful bit of kit that works, seamlessly with the software on the app, because it also allows you to collaborate and share that information. So you could capture an image with a Flir One Edge Pro at source. That can be then transferred to your account where someone else can share that data as well. You can add information
Yeah.
to emails or WhatsApp. So it's technology we're all familiar with now. Mobile technology is something
Yeah.
we're all familiar with for obvious reasons. So yeah, Flir One Edge is has been a really good addition to the Flir family.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me there was when you were talking about, either use it with your smartphone or with tablet. But as we were talking about access and the practicalities of actually getting to where you need to make that reading, when you were talking about, down the side of an engine compartment, that really is something
Yeah,
which, to my mind, is, you know, you can't actually get anything, more than the size of I don't know, maybe, a smartphone into the gap anyway. Um,
yeah.
and actually being able to place that in and get into the really hard to get at places, that's really kind of like in terms of the functionality alone, that allows you to do so much more.
I visited a prestige automotive manufacturer with the Edge Pro, and we used the Edge in that way, and it was only held by hand and put down into an engine bay. But you could even rudimentary, you could use a monopod. You could fix it through a monopod. You could use that to even get
Yeah,
down further into an environment where you couldn't get your hand, because it's quite a compact device. It's got quite a small profile. So there's kind of, it's one of those situations where
yeah,
we've introduced a product which we know is really practical, really useful. We've given it this added benefit now that it can be utilized and used away from the phone. But you find more and more applications to use thermography for generally than what you first think about, because the capability of thermography in an
yeah.
industrial commercial environment is really wide and diverse.
So I'm interested just to, I think you mentioned this as well. So it runs through your phone. You can save your
Yeah,
images on your phone. But then can
yeah,
you tell me a little bit more about cloud platforms, Flir Ignite? How does it interact with that?
yeah. Well, Flir Ignite's a really interesting one, because I suppose you could kind of, and this isn't a Flir terminology. This is my terminology, but it's kind of like a DNA thread now through the Flir camera family. Flir Ignite is a secure cloud-based storage service, effectively, for images, but can also be utilized
Yeah,
to do some analysis and create some reports. But what you actually do is, for example, if you purchase a camera, let's say a C5, which is one of our compact range, you can then you can create a cloud account on Flir Ignite. You can pair your camera to that cloud account. And then when you have a signal, or when you're connected to Wi-Fi, when you take your images, they're automatically securely transferred to your secure cloud account. And then that cloud account can be accessed from a desktop as well with Flir Ignite Sync.
there's another product I'd like to bring our viewers' attention to. You mentioned C5, but I want to talk about
Yeah.
C5X. Has area 8X. Tell me a little bit more about that product.
Yeah, so the CX5 is our first step into the EX rated thermal camera. Um, we have a lot of users, for example, petrochemical facilities, a lot of industrial areas. They'll have their EX zone rated areas where they have to use particular types of equipment. And we've now launched a product which, it's not intrinsically safe, because that would mean a difference in materials and using certain materials for production. But what we've done is we have created a restrictive breathing method case, which encloses the C5 camera. So we have a very well positioned model which has been in the market for a couple of years now, so well established. We've now utilized that with some really clever enclosure technology, again this restricted breathing method, and it's now certified as EX
Mm-hmm.
rated. So the advantage of that is you now have a zone 2 or a zone 22, depending on dust and gas. So it could be a cement factory, a flour mill, it could be mining, it could be petrochemical, but those
Yeah.
really heavy industrial areas which do have these zoning requirements. There's now a thermal camera which has got a good thermal IR resolution. So it's got a 160 by 120 detector. So that's that 19,200 measurement points. It also utilizes technologies such as one-touch level and span, which allows you to thermally tune your camera. And that's a really useful thing to be able to do to really maximize the image quality and the impact of the image that you're capturing at the time. But it also allows you to be in a zone 2 area, as an example, and you could be taking an image of something which is located in a zone 1 area. You don't need to have a zone 1 rated camera, because literally we could be talking a matter of a few meters between zone 2 and zone 1 in an environment. So you can stand in a zone 2, you've got a certified product, and if you are working on a site where EX rated equipment is required, then you've got very little opportunities when it comes to ranges of cameras which are available. There aren't many cameras available for that kind of rating, EX rating, but certainly from the Flir family, we have a product in the CX5 which is a really, really useful, and we even, we won the HazardX award last year for the CX5 when we launched it. So it's also been well received within the industry as well. But that also works with Flir Ignite. So again,
So it sounds like the Flir 1 and CX5, they are really just adding to the functionality of actual thermal imaging. So you've thought about, what more is it that we can offer users, and through these two products, there's a lot of variance about, for further application and for further application scenarios. These will be real solution providers, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, because we can. There's a multitude of manufacturers now, as we're all aware, and buyers have the choice of all kinds of different brands. But ultimately, a specification sheet is a specification sheet. So I've mentioned, thermal resolutions of being a particular size detector, 160 by 120, for example. So we can go through a specification sheet, and we can mark off certain parameters, of the camera. But ultimately, it's also about the overall, what's the overall solution that we're providing. And our software is kind of a keystone, a cornerstone, if you like, within our offer. Flir Ignite is available on almost every Flir camera now. It's only the older platforms which we don't have Ignite compatibility with. So we have this free cloud-based service. It's free up to a certain memory level, but ultimately it's still a relatively low cost. If you wanted to really increase to a 10 gigabyte account, for example, it's only potentially costing you a couple of £100 a year as a subscription. But for those utilizing that free first gigabyte, that's a lot of data, a lot of images which you're going to capture, which are going to be included free within your account. So it's that data, it's capturing the data safely and securely, being able to recall that data, being able to share that data and collaborate with other people within your business. So for example, your Ignite account, you can collaborate with other people who may be located in a head office somewhere. So you capture images in the morning, directly gets loaded to your Ignite account. Someone else in the office who may be more experienced with interpretation of thermal images and maybe a higher level in regards to training, they can then interpret the thermal images based on their experience. But ultimately, it's capturing that data at source and making sure it's easy, it's reliable, and it's recallable ultimately. So you can repeat the same process over and over again.
So Jason, that's great. You've already, I think, moving us on to the next subject that I'd like to talk about, and that's software and training. But particularly, I want to talk about Flir Thermal Studio. So you're talking about differences in the products, etc., and how they're adding value. What is it the Thermal Studio for users to get behind can actually then start to manipulate, see the value, and then start to act on the information that they're getting through your software tools?
Okay, well, Thermal Studio is a suite of products within the Thermal Studio range. So we have a Thermal Studio Starter, we have Thermal Studio Standard, and we have Thermal Studio Pro. Now, the interesting thing from the starter perspective is that's free. That's a free opportunity for potential users to create an account on the Flir site, and they can utilize the starter version, which gives you quite a lot of functionality, but there's watermarks included on the paperwork, and there's some limited functionality. But it gives users, for example, Flir Tools was kind of the most commonly used thermal software from a Flir perspective, but it's no longer supported by us as a business. Thermal Studio has now been introduced maybe 4 years ago now. So we've gone through that period of kind of transfer, but there's still a lot of users of Flir tools. And sometimes people don't want to change because what they're using is providing them with the capability to do what they need to do. But ultimately, you're also potentially missing out on what the new software can offer. So it's worthwhile, even if you're a Flir tools user, look at creating a simple account to be able to download the Thermal Studio Starter version. To give you an idea of what you're looking at, my description of it would be it's like Photoshop, but for thermal images. So you've got a desktop-based capability to really analyze thermal data in great detail. If that's something that you need to do as a business, you may be providing, for example, thermal surveys as part of your service. So your reporting capabilities to your customer becomes very important. So what if we move up through the Thermal Studio range, if I'll jump straight to Pro, the Pro version includes something called batch processing. It's not available on the other versions in the range. So Thermal Studio Pro gives you access to batch processing. And again, if you're providing thermal surveys as a service, you will be taking potentially hundreds of thermal images on every survey that you do. And what batch processing allows you to do is to make changes to those images in a batch. So you may decide you want a different color palette, or you want to change some of the parameters that you've got for the images. You can do that in a block. So all you do is actually select the type of function that you're going to change, and it can be applied to all of the images that you want to include in your report. That's a new feature that wasn't available on Flir tools, for example. It's also fast. So it's a lot faster when it comes to generating reports as well. It's a much more efficient piece of software to actually, so not only has it got all the additional functionality, including batch processing, but it also performs faster. And it also allows you to use a feature on the cameras, which is called inspection route. So inspection route is included in our, what we class as our premium range of camera. And what inspection route allows you to do, allows you to, on a PC, you will use a route creator software, which is included in Thermal Studio Pro. It's already in there as a function. You create essentially a route that you want to use the camera on. So you may be in substation 1 and you want to analyze motors 1 through to 12. You can actually build that route on your PC. You then, using Route Creator, you then load that route onto an SD card into your camera, and then you then start that route in the camera, and the camera will then tell you what you're going to inspect next. And it also uses what's called reference imaging. So the last time you took an image of that particular motor, you can recall that image. You can look at the condition if it's any different, but it also allows you to align the images over one another. Because one of the really important things when it comes to thermal imaging and trending is the repeatability. You want to be at the same distance. Ideally, you want to be in the same position that you took the image from. So the reference image capability within Route Creator is a really useful feature, which is only available within the Thermal Studio Pro offer. So if a combination of additional functionality plus Route Creator, we're really trying to help the user now. For example, you could have someone who's not experienced with thermal imaging, for example. They could be given the camera with the route built in, and the camera will say, okay, we're going to substation 1. You need to do motor 1 first, because obviously every motor will, in this case, will be identified. So it's we're trying to enhance the user's experience. We're trying to make sure that the data captured is repeatable and is therefore accurate. And then you can really do an accurate trend over time then when it comes to condition monitoring and predictive maintenance. So we're always trying to enhance the overall solution. There's only so far you can go with thermal cameras and resolutions and thermal sensitivities. And, we kind of look at our range of cameras now. We can cover all bases when it comes to certainly the portable products, which I deal with. But within the business, we have fixed cameras and we have science cameras and, we have security and we have military applications. There's all kinds of different users of different Flir technologies. But ours, generally, the products that my team and our team deal with is that portable industrial stroke commercial kind of applications.
That's really interesting to hear that there's 3 levels available, but on the level that you were talking about with the Pro, the route planning, So there's no cross communication. You know exactly what you've got to do on the day. You know exactly where you need to be, but overlaying the previous reference to what you're actually measuring, that's really powerful information. You know, as we're talking about effective condition monitoring, it doesn't become any more effective than that, surely.
No, well, it's kind of, you're trying to recreate those conditions where you've got the best chance of having the most accurate result. And I think as well, just something else I need to mention about software as well. So we've covered the Flir One app, we've covered Ignite, we've covered Thermal Studio, but there is actually, although Flir Tools as a desktop is not available anymore, there is a Flir Tools mobile piece of software, which is a free piece of software, which can also be utilized on a tablet, for example. It's just not desktop based. So we've kind of got a multiple number of options when it comes to software to really enhance the solution that the customer's looking to invest in.
I just want to finish off, if I may, with we talked about the products, we talked about the tools and the software, but there is another part of the offer which you give out to users, and that's actual training. So in terms of training courses, thermography, for example, what is it that Flir have to offer users who want to find out more about this, become more adept, and more beneficial for them in the long run?
Yeah, definitely. From the old quote of knowledge is power it's really applicable when it comes to thermography in particular, and acoustic imaging, in a different way. But there's a company that a lot of users will be familiar with called ITC, and ITC is within the Flir family. It's our training organization. So what we have is the ability to deliver training sessions at locations which are selected by Flir in the various regions within the countries that we work within. Levels 1, 2, and 3, or category 1, 2, and 3 ITC thermography qualifications, and they're the backbone, if you like, of when it comes to thermography training and qualifications. You'll see various people who will either be level 1, level 2, or level 3 qualified. So ITC deliver those courses. They can also deliver those courses on customer sites. So if a large industrial end or commercial end user wants to train a number of people, and they want to train them on their own site, that can also be accommodated within ITC. You then have there's a lot of other different courses as well. So we have a course on acoustic imaging which is available, which is an online course. There are other online courses available. So the thing to do is really to go onto the Flir website, where we've got information about ITC as well. But certainly from a knowledge perspective, we have that ability to provide the knowledge and to help the users really understand the technology more, because ultimately even things like understanding heat transfer becomes really important when you are carrying out thermal imaging. It's understanding why is something potentially giving off more infrared energy at that time. So knowledge is really important to us, and certainly within ITC, we really want to enable users to really maximise their understanding and application of that knowledge in their environments to get the best results.
Great. Jason, I really thank you again for your time today, coming back to talk to us for a third time. But there were products that we didn't talk about previously. Obviously, you've got the new Si2 for acoustic imaging, and all of the extra functionality plus range that brings in. The Flir One and the CX5 for hazardous areas, ATEX. I really take appreciation in that you've come and talked to us again. But what I see Flir as, it's not just a product provider for industry, it's a whole solutions provider for industry. And I think that comes across in the way that you guys are approaching the technology, both with the backup on terms of the software, but also in the training and development. It's been great talking to you, and perhaps we might have you back for a fourth time.
Yeah, it'd be good. I mean, obviously, from my perspective, I'm technical sales specialist for UK and Ireland. We work closely with RS, and if there's any potential, people who are interested in what we've talked about today, certainly reach out to your local RS key account manager or national account manager. We work closely, and we can arrange demos on site, so you can actually see this equipment in your own environment. So the Si2, for example, we'd be able to come into your environment and really look at some potential issues that you believe you might have. So that's another option as well. from our support as a manufacturer, working closely with our partner in RS, certainly just reach out, and I'll be more than happy to come along.